Hello guys, and welcome. It is ThatSrb2DUDE here today, bringing you yet another Splatoon 2 video. Now, today's video is going to be a follow-up to, I guess, two videos that I made 1 month ago. One of them being which of how we can make the competitive Splatoon 2 scene better, and what makes a great competitive Splatoon 2 map. Now, I gave a bunch of ideas of that because it had to do a lot with reducing the map pools when it comes to tournaments. So when it comes to just players or competitive players just practicing for these tournaments, it wouldn't be a thing where we have to play so many maps where it's just almost impossible to really optimize and actually get better as a team in competitive Splatoon. But what today's video is going to be about is that if we were to keep every single map, which is currently there's only 23 of them, what if we gave them all just one mode, and that would just be the mode that we used for certain map in competitive. Now, I've already got a list of what I think would be the greatest Splat Zones maps, the greatest tower control maps, greatest Rainmaker, and greatest Clam Blitz maps. I want to actually go through them with you guys just to let you know why I think this and why I picked these maps in particular, if this was to be the mode for this map. So let's get started. Now, starting with Splat Zones. Now, previously I said the best Splat Zones maps are usually the ones that are the smallest and where the opposition has more chance to be able to contest, which would mean that there's less travel from your spawn to the Splat Zone in general. Now, the maps I picked for this would be Muscle Forge Fitness, Humpback Pump Track, Inkblot Art Academy, Snapper Canal, Blackbelly Skate Park, and Piranha Pit. Now, the reason for why I've picked all of these maps is because it all fits that certain criteria, especially for Muscle Forge, Humpback, Inkblot, and Snapper Canal. It does not take that long to actually get some ink onto the zone. When you compare it to maps like Aron Mall and Port Mackerel, which take almost forever for you to actually get from your spawn to the middle of the map, it actually gives you more chance for the opposition to actually be able to contest the zone. Now, I'm not just picking these maps because, it's easy to get to the zone and it takes no skill or anything like that, and the opposition just can't do anything just because of that. Because the players that are actually holding the zone, that's actually going to push these players to actually learn how to control the zone better, which in my opinion shows more skill when it comes to actually control. Personally, I don't really think there's too much skill when it comes to control when the Splat Zone is a mile away from the actual spawn. And also when it comes to a longer map, you have to control usually 2 points. So, for say example, Port Mackerel, again, I know I'm using this a lot, but it's an awful Splat Zones map currently. You can basically control the middle of the map, which is where the Splat Zone is, and then you push up a little bit, you get to control the core area, and then you control the street. Now, basically, when you're trying to come out of spawn, if you're on the, the side that doesn't have the Splat Zone, you first have to work on getting your street back, you then have to work on getting your core area back, and then eventually you got to get to the zone. Like, there's so many steps to it when it actually comes back to getting into the actual game, where if you were the one that got fully wiped, or you lost 2 players and lost control of the zone, which in that case, you would just have to give up the zone and push back, otherwise you're just gonna die, then usually the opposition that had the zone may have gotten the point counter to 20. Bear in mind, if you are successful of reclaiming your street, reclaiming your core area, and then reclaiming the zone. There's just a lot more that you have to do till you actually get to the zone to be able to keep you in the game. When I look at Splatoon 1 Port Mackerel, it was a much better Splat Zones map based on the fact that when it came back to actually neutralizing and getting yourself back in the game so you can make some sort of comeback, you were able to, mainly because there was 2 zones and that one of them was on your side. And with this being a thing, it allowed you to actually stay in the game. And that's pretty much why I think the travel time in Splat Zones is very important to actually take into account. I think Muscle Forge does this well, Humpback Pump Track does this very well, Inkblot is extremely well. You'll actually notice with all of these maps, there's always one point where the enemies can actually take control of to make it worse for the opposition that doesn't have control of the zone. Like on Muscle Forge Fitness, the connecting bridge from the zone to the platform, you can take control of that platform to keep the enemies in the spawn. And it's also a high risk, high reward point, where if you do take out an enemy, it's going to make it worse for them. But also, it's actually really easy for the enemy to actually take back control of it. So it really does push a player's skill to actually hold a player in their spawn like that. Same thing with Humpback Pump Track. On the left side, when you're coming out of spawn, there's that long straightaway path where players can take control of it to actually be able to disrupt and keep you within the spawn. Inkblot is also another one that's pretty easy. There's a platform that the enemies can take control of. They usually use Inkjet here. Buck also can be taken down really easy, but a good team can hold that really well and knows when to either back off or stay in. With Snapper Canal, you have the snipe area, which you can easily take control of, but when the enemies are coming out of spawn, they have a higher ground area, which can clear the snipe area, which will then allow the enemies to eventually get to the zone. And just basic things like that, honestly. I also wanted to keep Black Belly and Piranha Pit especially, and mainly because since Splat Zones does have you know, some maps that may have 2 zones, I think these 2 in particular are the best ones when it comes to having 2 zones. It doesn't take too long for you to actually get from spawn to the first zone, so compared to like a map like Moray where the 2 zones are literally like right next to each other, they might as well just be 1 zone at that point. But I felt like these 2 maps would be good to keep in, to keep the variety of 2 zoned maps and all that type of stuff. So a little bit of a long explanation, but that's what I think would be the best maps for Splat Zones. Now let's move on to tower control. Now when it came to tower control, I explained in my video that tower control maps should not have tower paths that are proceeding away from the enemy spawn. I feel like there needs to be points of defense for the enemies where they have the opportunity to actually contest the tower, or the players that are pushing the tower and overcome these harder choke points to be able to proceed the tower further. And for the maps that I've picked that I think do this pretty well, if we were not to include Muscle Forge, Humpback, Inkblot, Snapper, Black Belly, and Piranha Pit, the maps I would include for tower control would be Starfish Main Stage, Port Mackerel, Schellendorf Institute, Arowana Mall, Gobi Arena, and Wahoo World. And the reason being for that is because it follows all that criteria. When you look at Starfish Main Stage, the first point of defense where the enemy team can contest is their snipe area. That's around the area of where the first checkpoint is and the second checkpoint. On the second checkpoint too, you have that large top right area where the enemy team can contest. This is basically going to push a player's skill a lot further. Port Mackerel would be another one, mainly because the tower always is moving forward. Now, I know Stingrays may run rampant over here. I mean, usually you probably only have 1 Stingray. But there are many points when it comes to actually defending the tower. Like, literally when the tower is being pushed, the snipe area, the whole upper areas from the left and right side of the maps, are points where the enemy have opportunity to actually contest the tower. This means if you are the team that's actually pushing the tower, you have a lot more places to watch, and you'll need the awareness to be able to counter where the enemy team is actually coming from. With Schellendorf, you have the entire glass area to be able to protect your tower from getting any closer to your spawn. It is also fairly quick to actually get to the tower, so you have many opportunities and points of where you can actually defend the tower also. Arowana Mall being another one, you have many different points where you can actually defend the tower, especially the top left open area and the right snipe area, which as a team, you can only do so much. There's only 4 players on your team, so there's got to be some sense of, hey, if we want to get this tower to be pushed any further, our team has got to push up and get some sort of control within these points if we're going to proceed the tower any further. And again, Gobi and Wahoo World follow the exact same thing. Loads of different places to actually go ahead and contest the tower. The tower is actually moving upwards for Gobi, and it's always usually fighting higher ground, which isn't easy, but there's many different ways and strategies to get around it and fight the enemy team from actually trying to defend it. And with Wahoo World, the majority of fights actually go down within the court area where the first checkpoint is. You'd see as this map, a lot of the time, games don't usually get to the second checkpoint. Mainly because it takes a lot of coordination to actually defend the big fight that happens in the core area for then the tower to actually proceed to the left side, which would be, of course, the right side if you are the opposing squad. It's not easy at all, of course, and it shouldn't be, but then there's a big fight when the tower is proceeding to the left side, where basically the entire team is just fighting for the tower. So in that case, this is one of the reasons for why I wanted to conclude Wahoo World, and of course, since it's always proceeding towards the enemy spawn. So those are the maps that I want to keep for tower control in particular. Now, moving on to the Rainmaker maps. There's only 5 of them, mainly because I feel, in general, when it comes to Rainmaker, it's very similar to how tower control is played. So I made it the mode that had the least maps for competitive. And for those maps, we have the Reef, Sturgeon Shipyard, Moray Towers, Camp Triggerfish, and Skipper Pavilion. Now, in the previous video, for what I think makes a good Rainmaker map, is usually maps that take a longer time for the Rainmaker to actually get to the pedestal. Now, in solo queue and in many different tournaments, you will notice when a map is too small for Rainmaker, if there's a full wipe in the start of the game, which usually does happen a lot in competitive play, basically the team that got the full wipe will just win, because it will not take long at all for the Rainmaker to actually get towards the pedestal. And in a lot of cases, personally, I don't think that's a good thing at all. It's basically a thing of, we fully wiped you, we're the better team, we only had to kill you once, that's it. Especially for a viewer's point of view, I don't think there's really anything fun about watching a game last for 20 seconds. Like, as a viewer, I want to see games go all the way, go the distance, as they say. So that's why I've picked these maps in particular, from the, I guess, remaining maps that we have. Reef being one of the shorter maps, funny enough, but since the Rainmaker pedestal is literally right next to the spawn, there is definitely a lot of opportunity for the enemies to actually come back into the game. And since a team that's holding the Rainmaker and pushing it forward, it actually makes it much harder for you to actually get a quick knockout for this map in general. Sturgeon Shipyard being notoriously a really long map to actually get the Rainmaker from the middle of the map to the enemy spawn. This is also another map that has the case where the Rainmaker pedestal is right next to the spawn. So with the map being really long, there's definitely a lot more opportunity to actually stop the Rainmaker from proceeding any further. And also when it comes to getting the Rainmaker anywhere, there's lots of paths. Like you can go up the top left, but usually you only get it to 50 points because getting it past 50 is not easy at all. You could take it through the sponge, which would give you a lot of points, but of course getting it on the sponge and taking the leap of faith onto the enemy side is not an easier task at all. And of course you can take the right area, which would take the longest amount of time, but is also a really good way of getting the Rainmaker somewhere. So with that, there is actually some opportunity for the enemy's team to actually come back from that. So those are some of my reasons for why I think Sturgeon Shipyard would be a good Rainmaker for map. Moray Towers. Now, this was actually one of the hardest maps for me to really think where it could be. Like, I know for Moray Towers, Splat Zones, that's awful. Tower control is also really awful. I mean, in fact, with tower control, once you've got it to a certain point, you've basically already won the game because I think the last checkpoint is pretty much impossible. You pretty much don't get a lot of time and there's no actual place to really defend the tower, so that's why it's not even in tower control. And Clam Blitz, it takes you so long to actually come back into the game to get anywhere close to your basket. It just didn't even really make much sense to me. But when I saw Rainmaker and Moray, personally, I think Moray Towers Rainmaker makes a lot of sense. I'm probably one of the better Rainmaker maps, despite the map, in my opinion, just sucking in general. And I'm going to tell you why with Rainmaker Moray. It takes an extremely long time for the Rainmaker to actually get towards the pedestal. There's definitely many different paths in getting the Rainmaker from one point to another. But, of course, in Moray Towers, you're always pushing the Rainmaker upwards. So wherever you go, the enemy team usually has the advantage because they're fighting on higher ground. Which would honestly be a thing which actually tests the players that are pushing the Rainmaker to be able to overcome the players of higher ground. It's not easy at all, but it allows the enemies to have a lot more opportunities to actually come back in. And I think it'll provide a lot more exciting games in general when it comes to Rainmaker. Next, you have Camp Triggerfish for Rainmaker. Personally, I think this works pretty well for Rainmaker. Also, since Camp Triggerfish is one of the longer maps when it comes to Rainmaker, there's only 2 paths that you can take. Tower control on Camp Triggerfish, I don't think is a good mode. Splat Zones on Camp Triggerfish is a very debatable one. I think it's a really interesting 2-zone map, but personally, I think the other Splat Zones maps that I picked would work much better instead of Camp Triggerfish. Skipper Pavilion would be another map that I would like to have for Rainmaker. You're going all the way down to bring the Rainmaker up. Skipper Pavilion is a lot like Moray in a way, and it takes quite a while for you to actually get the Rainmaker from the bottom of the map to the top on the enemy side, so I think Skipper Pavilion would be a good Rainmaker map. With the pool of maps that we have. And the last maps we have would be the remaining ones, which would be Manta Maria, Kelp Dome, Macomar, Walleye Warehouse, New Albacore Hotel, and Anchovy Games. Now, the thing I mentioned when it came to Clam Blitz is usually to do with where the clams spawn. And the placement of where the baskets are, how close they are to the spawn for the enemies to actually be able to contest. I mean, I didn't say that part in particular, but I think that's also a good factor to take into account. Now, I think all of these maps do this very well. Manta Maria is the only one that I'm kind of iffy about, mainly because there is one spawn point where clams do spawn literally right next to the basket, which honestly I don't think is fair at all. Clam Blitz is kind of a hard one. Like, I think it works extremely well for competitive in general, but this is one of the maps that I feel kind of weird about. Same with Kelp Dome. Like, I mean, honestly, with Kelp Dome, it is one of the worst maps literally in the game. The thing is that I would never have Kelp Dome in Tower Control or Splat Zones. I would maybe have it in Rainmaker. I mean, there's only that one cheese spot at the very start of the game, but honestly, I think in competitive, that probably might not happen as much. I mean, it has the opportunity to happen, but I think when it comes to high-level teams, it might not happen as much because they will be more aware of that. So in this instance, I may even put Kelp Dome back in Rainmaker or just to removing Clam Blitz. Because with Kelp Dome Clam Blitz, as long as you score a power clam, you can throw clams from the middle of the map into the opponent's basket, which is stupid. So honestly, I probably would put Kelp Dome back in Rainmaker just for that reason. But for the time being, I feel like I will leave it there for now. Now, Macklemore is a decent map in general. I think it worked fairly well when it came to tower control and zones, kind of. I don't think it worked at all with Rainmaker, but I also think it works really well with Clam Blitz, since the map in general is very small. And the majority of the time with Clam Blitz, you're just fighting in the middle to then be able to, you know, build a power clam to score. I think it actually forces the opponents that are defending to really keep control of their basket, which is very possible to do at the same time. And breaking past it through the middle is also a thing that's not easy, because it's kind of like a stalemate-ish thing where the opponents are trying to nip at each other to look for openings to get the power clam into the basket. So for that, that's why I kind of wanted it to be in a Clam Blitz. Walleye Warehouse. Now that's honestly one of the better Walleye Warehouse maps compared to Rainmaker, Tower Control, and Zones. Splat Zones Walleye, since Stingray being a thing, if you get fully wiped, you're going to eat a Stingray on your snipe. You're going to have to jump out, waste time, or just die to the Stingray. Getting back in the zone for this map in particular is honestly one of the most mind-numbing things. And it's always usually a death wish when you just drop from your snipe, or just going in anywhere in general to the middle of the map. It's very, very easy to keep control of the zone on this map in particular. With tower control, yes, it kind of does follow the rules of the tower is going towards the enemy swarm, which it is, but of course, the same strategies of, hey, Stingray is actually broken on this map, let me just ray you in your spawn so you cannot move and come out. So, tower control also axed. Rainmaker, the exact same thing as tower control. Let me just ray you inside your spawn so you just cannot get out. Have fun with that, idiot. But Clam Blitz though, honestly, I think Clam Blitz works pretty well for Walleye Warehouse, because honestly, Stingray is not really an issue on this map. With Clam Blitz Walleye, I think there's a lot more fighting that actually goes down to the middle. It's a lot safer to do that. There's more defensive points in general, I think, which usually is just your spawn. But that's only because the aggressing team trying to get close to the basket is usually going to send the majority of their players to push up onto the platform through the closed, basically to get closer to the spawn and no further than that, which allows the team trying to stop the aggressors to actually challenge and reclaim map control on this map. Therefore, I feel like Walleye Warehouse in general for Clam Blitz is one of those maps that work a lot better for it. New Albacore Hotel is also one. I don't think it works well at all for tower control, mainly because it actually does go further away from the spawn at a certain point. And the very last point in New Albacore Hotel, the tower goes up so high. For most weapons, it's so much harder for actually take control of the tower in general. I think this map works pretty decently when it comes to Splat Zones and Rainmaker, and I don't think Clam Blitz is one of the worst either. I think New Albacore Hotel is a pretty decent Clam Blitz map. And Anchovy Games Clam Blitz, I also think is a really good Clam Blitz map. Many different strategies that can be played on this one. I think it really stresses that, hey, getting control of the opponent's platform needs to be addressed, and doing that in general is not easy at all. I think it really pushes the anchor player's ability to be able to defend from the left side and their left fan at the same time while being on their platform. And I think controlling that as a team does show pretty good team coordination and the communication of where they're going to push. Like, are they going to send their players going through the right fan to the platform, or are they going to send their players going all the way to the right, getting like a baller push or bubble push from the far right straight away towards the enemy team's basket? So there's many different things with that I feel would work really well as a Clam Blitz map. And honestly, that's pretty much my choices, guys, for when it comes to if we were to use all 23 maps. Like, I'm still kind of iffy with the placement of Manta Maria, Clam Blitz, and Kelp Dome in general. Kelp Dome really in general, because like none of these maps work for this map. But if we're going to include this map in the game, we gotta give it some placement. I might remove it and put it to Rainmaker to make it work better, but at this point in time, I'm going to leave it where it is. Now, you probably kind of notice a recurring thing where I keep stressing the enemies need some sort of point to be able to contest and defend and all this type of stuff. What I'm trying to do with this is to prevent maps becoming extremely easy knockouts. I want to pick maps that have clear points that this is the point that you need to defend for you guys to actually come back into the game. And if you're the side pushing, these are the points on the map that you need to actually take control of and aggress. The odds might be against you, but if you're better than that, you should be able to push forward. I also think it's very important to viewers who also watch competitive Splatoon as well, because I don't think it's fun in general to watch a team get completely cheesed because there's no actual good points to actually get back into the game, or there's a lot of chance to actually get back into the game. It's not fun or interesting, and unarguably, it's a lot more fun as a viewer to watch a game go the distance, go to overtime, basically games being longer in general. It's a lot more fun to watch that. And if a team is clearly better than the other, then these hard points that takes a little bit to really get control of should not be much of an issue to actually overcome. So, with all that being said, all I've got to say is, guys, thank you very much for listening to me, watching this video if you made it this far. And I honestly want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. If you were to pick all 23 maps within the game and were to give them all just one mode, which maps would you pick and why? Maybe you disagree with some of the maps that I've picked. Personally, this is just what I think and what I think works for what I said in my previous video. Opinions are always appreciated. I look at all of them, and I love starting conversations and like this and all that type of stuff because I think it's fun. So bear in mind, by the way, I've heard some talk with some TOs and they have not stopped talking about reducing the map list, and they also agree that it might be a good thing to actually do. If we were to get it into a style much like this, I think this would provide the most amount of variety, as some people say, you know. Variety honestly isn't everything when it comes to competitive play. Like, with competitive play, with literally any game, you really should not have to force things into competitive. Like, we just forced 92 maps to be played willy-nilly in competitive. Like, it does a big disservice to all of us competitive players wanting to actually learn and get better at a decent rate. Like, it's impossible. It's impossible to have this all in your mind that, oh, all these 92 maps, I know everything about them. Like, no one does. Don't lie to me. None of you guys watching this video right now literally know every single strategy when it comes to all 92 maps in the game. I don't. I have all good ideas of all of them, of course, but I don't know how to do them optimally. And that says a lot because, hey, I've won a lot of tournaments when it comes to Splatoon 2. And me saying that would be like, what? Wouldn't you think a pro player literally knows everything to do about this game? Am I just a fake pro player? I mean, I don't know. But yeah, that's gonna be the video, guys. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please, if you did, like, favorite, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Follow me on Twitter and Twitch, both in the description below. Do it for both if you're feeling generous. Make sure to hit the bell notification button next to the subscription button to let you guys know whenever I do upload a video. And also consider joining my public Discord, where you can go ahead and talk to myself and my Dude Society community. With all that being said, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I shall see you guys in a future one.